6 months after the Japanese fascists suddenly attacked Pearl Harbor, causing heavy damage to the U.S. Navy, the Americans defeated the Japanese fleet in the naval battle that took place at Midway Island. This is considered the decisive victory in the Pacific during World War II, including the contribution of Major Joseph Rochefort. Strategic circumstances. After expanding the war in the Pacific to include Western outposts, the Japanese Empire quickly achieved its initial strategic goals, taking over the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and especially East Asia. Dutch India, present-day Indonesia, which had essential oil resources, was extremely important to Japan. Thus, preliminary planning for the second phase of the operations was expected to begin in January 1942 at the earliest. Disagreements between the Army and Navy delayed a new strategy until April 1942. Admiral Yamamoto's plan, prioritizing the destruction of U.S. aircraft carriers, was finally approved. This decision stemmed from concerns about the growing threat posed by U.S. carriers. The Doolittle raid on Tokyo exposed Japan's vulnerability and motivated Yamamoto to draw out the U.S. fleet for a decisive battle. However, a direct attack on Pearl Harbor was deemed too risky due to strengthened U.S. defenses in Hawaii. Yamamoto opted for a different approach to achieve his goal of crippling U.S. carrier power. Yamamoto chose Midway. As the name Midway means midway, it is located 5,200 kilometers from the coast of San Francisco, USA, and 4,100 kilometers from Tokyo, Japan. With an area of only 6.2 square kilometers, made of coral rings, during World War II, Midway was an extremely important military location for the Americans because it was a refueling place for trans-Pacific flights and was an important outpost in protecting the west coast of the United States. Yamamoto believed that the attack on Midway would directly threaten U.S. territory, forcing the U.S. to send troops to support Pearl Harbor, thereby drawing the entire Pacific Fleet into an ambush to quickly destroy and force the opponent must find negotiated solutions to end the war. From there, Japan will be free to establish its hegemonic region, commonly known as the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Bloc. The plan to capture Midway Yamamoto's attack was extremely complex, requiring careful and timely coordination of many battle groups across hundreds of miles of open sea. The attack was divided into 3 main waves, the first being an airstrike on Midway, the second being the main attack. Mobilized a force of 5,000 soldiers to invade the island to crush any remaining American forces, and the third wave was to ambush all American reinforcements from Pearl Harbor to destroy the Pacific Fleet. The scene was so perfect, but the Japanese did not know that the Americans had already decoded their entire plan, the plan codenamed AF. 3 months before Pearl Harbor, the Radio Reconnaissance Division of the U.S. Naval Intelligence Agency discovered that the Japanese were using a new set of codes, called JN-25B. However, due to the extremely complex nature of JN-25B, they have not been able to solve it. Therefore, the U.S. side was completely surprised when Japanese planes attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. On April 21, 1942, a code spying group codenamed Station Hypo of the U.S. Naval Intelligence Agency, including many linguists and mathematicians, under the leadership of Navy Major Joseph Rochefort, worked in a secret bunker deep underground on the island of Hawaii, decoded the JN-25B code. Professor Craig Simons, who teaches at the U.S. Navy's Naval War College and is also the author of the book The Battle of Midway, said, JN-25B uses ancient poems from the 10th century in Japan as the framework for the code. Next, they mixed it with several local languages, including dialects no longer used by many Japanese. They all turn into binary numbers that, if solved using normal mathematical methods, would take 18 billion times to solve once because each transmitted message has different decoding keys. Among all the news reports, the Station Hypo team paid special attention to a telegram signed by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the father of the Pearl Harbor raid. The decoding results of the telegram showed that Yamamoto ordered 4 aircraft carriers with 248 aircraft, 2 battleships, 15 destroyers, and 16 aircraft to take off and land underwater at a location called AF. When the telegram was sent to the U.S. Naval Command in the Pacific, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief, and generals in the U.S. Department of War in Washington all deduced that AF could be a target. In the South Pacific Ocean, such as Port Mosby Island, New Caledonia Islands, or Fiji, and even the Hawaiian Islands or the west coast of the United States. There is also an opinion that the Japanese knew that the US side had decoded the JN-25B code set, so they spread smoke to create a distraction to carry out another attack with a more formidable level than the attack on Pearl Harbor. Furthermore, Admiral Nimitz Superior in Washington, Admiral Ernest King, through his reconnaissance unit OP-20G, confirmed that the AF was the Aleutian Islands. However, Navy Major Joseph Rochefort did not agree with those inferences. He said it was arbitrary because, with so many targets, the U.S. Navy was not capable of protecting them all at the same time. To be able to convince his superiors to change their view on the direction of attack, as well as to be able to stop the Japanese Navy's plot, Rochefort must prove what AF is. On May 6, 1942, a godsend gift suddenly fell into the hands of the station hypocode team. While monitoring radio signals transmitted from the Japanese Navy, the station hypo team received a news broadcast from a Japanese reconnaissance plane flying near Midway Island. In the message encrypted with the JN-25B code set, Major Joseph Rochefort realized that the word AF was repeated twice, and this made him suspect that Midway Island was AF. But to be sure, Rochefort set a trap by ordering Jasper Holmes, a naval officer in the station hypo group, to send a telegram to Pearl Harbor via undersea cable, the content indicating the source of fresh water used. Life on Midway Island has broken down, and the water shortage is starting to get worse. It was not difficult for the Japanese Naval Intelligence Agency to receive and decode that telegram. Just 3 hours later, a bulletin from the Japanese Naval Command was coded JN-25B and sent to the Japanese fleet in the Pacific. The AF is having difficulty supplying fresh water. The attack force needs to pay attention and have a plan for this. According to Major Joseph Rochefort, this is the most accurate basis to confirm that AF is Midway Island. Battle of Midway. At 4:30 a.m. on June 4, 1942, Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo launched aircraft attacks. By 6:20 a.m., several U.S. military bases in Midway were destroyed. At this time, American pilots at Midway mostly used outdated Brewster F-2A aircraft, so Admiral Nagumo launched another attack to neutralize the Americans' defense capabilities, clearing the way for the announced landing. The date is June 7th. Following the tactics of Japanese aircraft carriers at that time, Nagumo retained half of its force as a backup. At 7:15, Nagumo ordered backup aircraft to mount conventional bombs to attack ground targets. Installing the bomb took 30 minutes, but at 7:40 a.m., a Japanese reconnaissance plane called back to say it had discovered a large American fleet west of Midway Island. Nagumo immediately revoked the order to install bombs and anti-ship torpedoes and requested reconnaissance aircraft to determine the location of the U.S. fleet. At 7:53 a.m., there were more reports of American planes heading toward Midway Island. Due to confusion because he did not know which direction was the priority direction for the interception, Nagumo made the wrong decision to wait for the initial attack force to land on the aircraft carrier before launching the reserve force. That mistake led to the consequence that 2 squadrons of American anti-submarine aircraft, VT-6 and VT-8, without any enemies to stop them, simultaneously launched torpedoes at 3 Japanese aircraft carriers, Agaki, Soryu, and Kaga, refueling planes that had just landed. In just 6 minutes, all 3 ships filled with gasoline and bombs on deck caught fire and exploded. At this time, the Midway attack fleet had only the aircraft carrier Hiryu left. In a desperate effort, Zero fighters took off from the Hiryu and bombed the U.S. aircraft carrier Yorktown. Although severely damaged, the Yorktown continued to operate, so much so that during the second attack, Japanese pilots thought the Yorktown was unharmed. At 2 p.m., planes on the 2 aircraft carriers Enterprise and Hornet launched a full-scale attack targeting the Hiryu. Hit by several series of bombs, the Hiryu tilted to one side and sank. By evening, Admiral Spruance, now the tactical commander of the U.S. Navy, ordered the heavily damaged Yorktown to be abandoned to concentrate forces to protect Midway if the Japanese continued to attack in the morning. For his part, Admiral Yamamoto initially decided to move the remaining fleet east to hunt for American aircraft carriers. But at midnight, when there was no sign of an American aircraft carrier, Yamamoto again ordered the fleet to turn west. However, the appearance of the American submarine Tambor caused the warships in the Japanese formation to separate. As a result, the cruiser Mogami, unable to change direction in time, crashed into the Kikuma. Moreover, A reconnaissance plane reported that in front of the Japanese fleet were 2 American aircraft carriers and dozens of destroyers, so Yamamoto ordered a retreat. On June 6th and 7th, all planes at Midway and planes from the aircraft carriers under the command of Admiral Spruance launched a decisive attack, targeting the retreating Japanese fleet. By June 7th, Japan lost a total of 4 aircraft carriers and 1 cruiser. 248 aircraft were shot down, and 3,057 people died. On the U.S. side, this number is 1 aircraft carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, and 307 deaths. Stopping the Japanese Navy's attack on Midway Island was the premise that paved the way for horrifying bombing raids on Japanese soil that ended with 2 atomic bombs. Also in the Battle of Midway, many skilled Japanese pilots did not return, but according to Admiral Yamamoto, "I trained them for a year to lose them in just 1 day." A turning point on the Pacific battlefield. The Battle of Midway significantly weakened Japan's offensive capabilities and opened the way for the American military's counterattack. After the Guadalcanal campaign in August 1942, the situation on the Pacific battlefield began to change in favor of the Allies. However, objectively speaking, the U.S. military's victory was not as miraculous as many people thought. Historian Gordon Prang wrote in the book Miracle at Midway that, although the U.S. military was not as overwhelming in numbers as the Japanese, American aircraft were more perfect. Just relying on the advantage of aircraft carriers and bases on islands also gave the U.S. an advantage. For its part, the Japanese army fell into an ambush trap set by the U.S. and did not have the best preparation. Historian Laura Auer at the Hampton Naval Museum, USA, pointed out that the training process, perseverance, and initiative of American pilots played a decisive role in the Midway victory. In addition, America's effective intelligence work, the weakness and passivity of the Japanese Navy, technological shortcomings, and other factors such as environment and skills all contributed to the outcome. Defeat for the Japanese Navy. After that, the U.S. Navy balanced its forces with the enemy in terms of aircraft carriers and for the first time had an offensive position in the war. Not long after, the United States attacked Guadalcanal, starting a fierce war in the Solomon Islands, finally defeating Japan's battle-hardened Navy and Air Force units by the end of 1944.